I'm really excited to introduce Jim. Jim Malcolm is an industry veteran with more than 2 decades of imaging, virtual reality, and consumer product experience. In his current role, he serves as the General Manager, North America at Humanized Technology, where he is responsible for managing the launch and success of Vue's VR camera. He also serves as the immediate past president of the Imaging Alliance and sits on the board of directors for Consumer Technology Association and is the founder of Exality, a visual imaging company which focuses on resolving technology hurdles that are slowing the adoption of VR applications. Prior to Humanized, Jim was the president and chief marketing officer of Ricoh Imaging American Corporation, leading the camera and lens business for U.S. and Canada. Before that, he was CEO of Aperture 360 Interactive Consulting, and has held various leadership roles at Sony Electronics. He's also just a really great guy. He's fascinating to have dinner with, and he can take you down a journey about what's happening in virtual reality that is so exciting. I couldn't wait to bring him here. And for you all, you're going to go home and be rock star to either your kids or your grandkids, because you're going to know a lot more about what's coming, and they're going to be impressed.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Great meeting. Wow. With that introduction, I'm not even sure where to start on this whole thing today. Boy, when you sit there and listen to it, you're like, wow, that's kind of a crazy career. Cathy, thank you for the introduction, and hopefully all of the tech works today. I'm going to give you the standard disclaimer up front. I am a tech leading kind of guy. In fact, we can go to this slide and you'll see how, I don't know why this keeps popping up. I don't know what's going to happen here. All right, let's do this. So I am a tech forward guy. I started in the whole photo industry back at Rochester Institute of Technology. And let's hear it for Rochester. All right. And at the time, Kodak had given us film scanners so that we could actually film or scan film at the RIT labs. And like any good student would do, of course, we took them apart. And the reason we took them apart was we thought, well, maybe we could take pictures without film. So we made optical rigs and we scanned this intermediate image flying through space. And believe it or not, we took pictures without film. And at the time, people didn't think it was going to work. A guy by the name of Bob Caspi with a company called Leaf Systems based out of Massachusetts made some of the very first digital cameras. I got the opportunity to work with him on that. Then I got recruited into Sony Electronics, where I spent about 12 years of my life introducing the world to digital photography. And I think probably one of the most exciting things for me in all of that was a camera that took pictures onto a floppy disk. Some of you are as old as me. I'm just saying. But that whole process of taking pictures digitally, I would go into camera stores and say, check this new thing out, we got it. It takes pictures without film. And the camera stores and the photo finishers would say, are you kidding me? Get out of here with that. Look at the picture quality's terrible. Nobody has USB on their computer. What are you going to do with this? It's never going to work. And that's where my latest endeavor is right now, which is virtual reality, which is what we're going to talk about today and how it's going to impact all of our lives in the not too distant future. Somewhere between all of those other things, I had the opportunity to work on moving music from CDs to digital downloads, the introduction of digital books, and now this whole thing to digital imaging. And if we look at what's happening in the industry today, as you know better than anybody, there are more pictures taken today than any time in history. It's also an interesting paradox right now because the imaging industry, from a revenue manufacturer's point of view, which is what I specialize in, right, is some of the lowest it's been in history. Right? And it's because the digital imaging is putting pictures into another whole space. It's either ending up at Google and Facebook and other venues. And so your challenge, I can't pretend to know your business because I make hardware. I don't organize photos. In fact, I could probably use some help. But how we start to pull all of those sources together and make them accessible in the future is a huge piece. And it feeds into this whole virtual reality stuff. So my journey in all of this is how do we transition an industry into the future? So I don't like to do things that are advertisements, so please don't take this video I'm going to show as an advertisement for my company or the products that I sell. But I want to show it because it's kind of an inspirational piece on kind of get your head around what I think about when I think about digital imaging. All right, so a little bit of a promotional piece, so I apologize about that. But what that video does for me, we shot that in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, is it really kind of helps me get my head around, boy, things are changing. If I want to capture the world around me, how am I going to do it, and how do I bring that to life in virtual reality? And which begs the question, like, at some point in our lives, we have to make a decision when technology replaces the familiar. Right? What is it that we're used to doing today that suddenly is going to be disrupted or changed or augmented, right? Well, I say surprise, but maybe there is no surprise. It's already happening, right? It's happening to you today because what's happening to the imaging industry is we've stopped recording and capturing a moment of time to recording or capturing life over time. So this is when we take the still image, we add video to it, we put music and everything else. Everybody always has their phone out, right? We're not necessarily texting, hey, I'm out at dinner tonight with Bill, Tom, and Mary. I take a picture and I post a single picture and everybody knows I'm out to dinner and who I'm with, right? So it's not capturing a moment in time, it's capturing life over time. And when we capture life over time, I don't care what book you read, the Innovator's Dilemma, Who Moved My Cheese, right? There's a list of different books that are out there. The photo film industry didn't really pay attention to the fact that someone moved their cheese and that the life was going to be different. And we all know how that ended. And now you've got big companies like Sony out there that are dominating the digital camera market, and they were a nobody in that space years ago. So keep that in mind. And it's not limited to the imaging industry itself. Retailers aren't innovating either, right? I think the slide I should have put up here was Toys R Us, right? Right? It's happening. And Toys R Us did not fail because of Amazon, right? A lot of people say, well, I failed because of Amazon. I beg to differ. They failed because they stopped innovating at their store to attract customers in with their kids to be able to get that excitement of walking down the toy aisle and mom and dad having to go, oh man, now we got to go home with all this stuff, right? So because they failed to bring the people into their store, that's where they failed. They didn't fail because Amazon took the business away. All right, my last piece of analogy here, the slow and agonizing death of the landline phone. Not my title, Time Magazine's article, right? You ask these millennials and 20-somethings right now about a landline, they're like, what's a landline? They don't know, right? So this is another one that's going to go the same way that the phone has killed all of the film and imaging. So the rest of my talk today is really about you. It's about starring you. And most importantly is, don't be a Kodak. Now, that sounds terrible at first, right? I mean, I have this conversation with some of our other executives and stuff, and they're like, well, Kodak is a great company. If we got everybody going back to making Kodak moments, the imaging industry is going to be powerful and amazing again. So I agree. Like, from that perspective, if you can get the Kodak moment mentality back and capture those important parts of life, and then you guys curate those and turn them into lifelong memories for people to work with, this is a win. It's a win for the consumer. It's a win for the industry. But I'm referring to the other side of Kodak, which is they didn't pay attention. They didn't pay attention to what's happening to their customer, how people were ingesting digital data into their lives, and what the future looked like. And we know how that story kind of ended. Sorry, there's a screen that keeps popping up here, and I just have to keep going through it. This is the future I want to talk about. It's kind of hard to see. Who saw the movie Minority Report? Good. Get some precogs that are out there floating in, loaded with memories. Tom Cruise gets up and starts to, sorry, let me go back to here. Back to that little screen issue I have. Okay, Tom Cruise gets up there and he starts grabbing memories and moving things around and interacting with things. Well, that's what I'm going to try to do for you right now. All right? Now, I'm going to warn you that the technology that I'm about to play with is in its infancy. I have two controllers in my hands, which ultimately are going to become my hands. I'm going to put on a virtual reality headset. We're going to switch over to a different computer if everything works as it's supposed to work. I won't be able to see, so hopefully I don't walk off the edge. There is something called a chaperone in my headset, so I will see if I'm getting dangerously close to anything. But if I hear anybody gasp, scream, panic, anything like that, I will know that things are not going as planned. Now, give me a minute. Let me just make sure this is actually going to turn on. Now, this is the geeky part of the whole thing, all right? This is Nerdville. People look at me and they're like, really? This is what you do? I'm like, yeah, this is kind of what I do. Wow, look at that. Okay, looks like it's coming in. So those, whoops, my hands are on backwards. All right, got it fixed. Right and left. Okay, we're good.
Hi, this is Jim. I'm coming to you from virtual reality, and we're talking a little bit about how this technology is going to end up in our future and how soon it's really going to become mainstream. Well, let's go ahead and take this little panel out of the way to you in virtual reality. I'm actually standing in a space on stage. I've got 2 controllers in my hands and a virtual reality headset. And what I can see when I look around is a full immersive world. Now, right now, I don't have a background in there, so you don't want to see the picture, but I'll show you that in just a minute. But the amazing part about virtual reality is I can take my memories and I can walk through them. And not only can I walk through them, I can pick them up and I can sort them and I can move them, right? I can actually resize them. I can make things larger, right? I can stack them in depth. So if I wanted to literally walk into my photo album, I literally can be walking through my memories. But we're not limited in virtual reality to still images. Really, any digital medium that you work with can also become virtual reality. Now, I've just got a table here. I'm going to just simply drop this right into it. There we go. And now what we are playing is an old film movie that's been scanned off into a digital world and now is being broadcast in virtual reality. Incredibly powerful what you can do in virtual reality. So I've taken that memory out and we can just stack it over here with our other memories. So at the Association of Professional Photo Organizers, I'm not going to pretend to know what it takes to organize photos for the future. I will tell you that when you're in a digital world, you're going to be able to see things in sight and sound and very high resolution. And because we can scale and make things bigger than life, how you save your images today are going to affect the future. And finding somebody who starts to get expertise in virtual reality is going to be very important. Because in reality, so to speak, you don't know where your next customer is going to come from. Now, I will tell you that all of us will live some part of our life in virtual reality. It's just a matter of how much of it and when. And the exciting part for me when I spend time in virtual reality is the potential when we start to look at virtual reality as a social activity, not just an individual isolating activity. But let me show you a little bit more about what virtual reality can actually do. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to hide some of the world around us.
360 virtual reality camera. Other
And then
camera
we can play here
systems
for a
deliver
second.
2D 360 video. When we view these 2D experiences, they seem flat, one-dimensional. This is not how we see the world. Views sees the world in the same way we do. With its 3D capture system, Views delivers a fully immersive experience.
So let's go ahead and pause this experience. So one of the recent accomplishments of the Views camera was it was selected by NASA to be put into the International Space Station. Let's see, there we go. So currently we are floating around about 245 miles above the horizon in the International Space Station. And this is content that's been captured, beamed down to Earth, and now I'm looking at this experience in full 360-degree 3D virtual reality video. It's an incredibly powerful experience. If I want to share that with my friends, I can simply pull out a little mirror, make sure that I look good. Hey, check this guy floating over me. Or good enough anyway. I take out my lovely trusted selfie stick, and I'm going to say, this is Jim Malcolm with Humanized Technologies. Let's get back to reality and move on out of the International Space Station. Smile. Okay, there we go. There's my selfie from space.
So that's me in virtual reality at the International Space Station and glitching like crazy. Hey, look at this guy go. That's pretty cool. All right, with that, I'm going to take this off. All right, you stayed. I often panic when I do that people would like quietly leave the room. I take it off, and I'm like, really? That's just not very nice. All right, so I'm going to put back my glasses, which I should probably wear my glasses more often. Let's get the screen back up here. So we're good. So there's different levels of immersion. Now, what I just did there is something called 6 DOF, not to get too technical, right? 6 degrees of freedom, which means I can move forward, backwards, left and right, up and down. But that's like the extreme of where you can go. The very basics are things like playing your videos back on your computer screen. Who's seen 360-degree videos? Your clients have 360 videos in their portfolios right now, soon? They'll start to show up. You'll start seeing them. It'll start with that. Then they'll say, you know what, I want to take that 360 and I can put it on my mobile phone and I can look around. Then maybe they get into something like Google Cardboard so they can hold it up to their eyes and they get stereo. Then they have dedicated headsets, and then all the way up to like 6 DOF that I talked to you a little bit about. But VR really fits in this part of the headset. The other thing's considered 360 video, and that you just watch on your TV screen or on your computer. But VR is really intended to be played back in a VR headset. And the business is big, right? It's billions of dollars are being invested by dozens and dozens of companies in order to do this. And you may have heard on the news, like, oh, is VR a false start? And do people really want to isolate themselves in a VR headset? And there's a lot of confusion. But I'll tell you that what these companies are working on aren't just like individual experiences, but social experiences. So that when you can join family and friends and neighbors and all of that type of stuff in a VR headset, it'll change your life. And particularly for people at first who can't get out, the elderly. There's a lot of work being done right now on treating Alzheimer's in a VR headset, anxiety, training and education. So you're going to see more commercial applications of VR first, but then it's going to move very quickly into the consumer segments. And it's all kind of based around a VR headset. This is a laundry list. I don't expect you to take notes on any of it. In fact, here's even another set of the laundry list. So there are a lot of headsets that are in the market. And the way I like to talk about and think about the headset market is it is a 4th screen in our life. We have a TV in our living room. We have a computer on our desktop. We have a mobile phone in our hand. In the future, we will have a virtual reality headset. And if you think about that as the 4th screen, what you're going to think about is how do I take my product, my service, my capability, and display it or activate it or utilize it in that 4th screen. Now, I'll be the first to tell you there's only about 15 million virtual reality headsets in the market today. Of that, there's only about 250,000 of them that are used on a regular basis. So in the scope of the opportunity, that's a really, really small number. That's going to change exponentially very, very quickly. And social will be a big part of it. Mark Zuckerberg, whether you hate the guy, giving up personal information, this is not a political statement, but his goal is to get 1 billion VR headsets into the market. And that space that I was working on is actually based in a Facebook infrastructure. So you wonder what VR is. Let's go back to the roots of photography and some stereoscopes that were done many, many years ago, 1800s, late 1800s. They made stereoscopes, and they had cameras that took 3D images, and you'd hold this big piece of wood up at the library, and people lined up for hours to look at things in, pictures in 3D. In fact, you may see some of these in the collections that you do. People want to digitize them and what have you. Well, would you be surprised if I told you that a VR headset is really nothing more than that? It's basically a pair of lenses that focus onto a screen. You can put your mobile phone in there, or you can use a more advanced screen. But really, all that VR is taking a stereoscope and looking at it at 30, 60, or 90 frames per second, and then being able to look all around. It's really very basic, and it's very simple. A lot of people think it's like black magic and some complicated something going on in virtual reality. That's not. It's really very simple. It's just repeated pictures in stereo. So, this screen's going to drive me crazy. the file structures that play back in virtual reality are all the ones that you're familiar with today. Your JPEGs, your PNGs, your TIFFs, all of those types of things. All of your digital files can be played back in a virtual reality headset. Now, there are resolution considerations that you want to take, because you saw when I scaled that picture in the headset, like you can make things very large, and in a lot of cases you're going to want to have higher resolution, or higher resolution is better if you want to be able to really engage with them later on and, for lack of a better term, zoom into those pictures. So keep that in mind. Resolution is important. In addition to the existing file formats, both video and still images, there are two programming languages in the industry. One is something called Unreal Engine, and one is called Unity. These are programming languages that people much nerdier than I sit hours and hours to code, so you can actually walk through those environments and take advantage of 6DoF and all that type of stuff. It doesn't take that much learning to be able to take images like what I did today and pull them into a world, but to create that world from scratch, that's where you need a programming language to do that. And Unity and Unreal are the two big ones. There's others out there, but those are the two big ones that are really vying for the market. So we're going to take a little bit closer look. Yes, I'm going to get even nerdier. Is nerdier a word? It is now, I guess. But in order to get nerdier, we have to address the elephant in the room, which is the dialogue between 360 video and VR video, because they're very different techniques. So let's take a look at some recent innovations in 360 imaging. And I'll pick on two products. One is Gopro Fusion, which just started shipping, I think it was November, maybe December of last year, and then the Ricoh Theta. What the claim to fame with the GoPro product is that you capture everything around you in 360 degrees, and then after you shoot, you go back in and you decide what you want your movie to look like, right? So you still are going to output a 2D video, but instead of framing the camera while you're shooting, you're going to frame afterwards. So it moves the act of videoing post-event. So if you're jumping off of a building with a parachute, preferably, you don't have to worry about, am I pointing the camera too much down or too up, right? You just jump, and then you go back and script all that stuff later. The other product that I have up there is the Ricoh Theta. Ricoh Theta's latest innovation is that from that device, you can actually stream directly to your TV set. So you can sit in your living room and look at a 360-degree picture from the Theta, and you just simply hold it in your hand and use gesture controls. There's little accelerometers, this thing's called accelerometers, so when you move the camera around, it moves the picture on your TV. So those are 360 cameras. There's a bunch of 360 cameras that are out there. This is just a quick little laundry list of them. And we're going to share the presentation so you can, if you really want to dive into this stuff more, you can. But the important thing to recognize is when you shoot in 360-degree video that's not stereo, when you play it back in a VR headset, you're taking the same image and playing it both the left and right eye. So when you look at it in a headset, you don't see depth. It's almost like looking through one eye. You lose that depth perception. To me and to the industry, actually, it's very uncomfortable. You can imagine a pair of binoculars like this where you're just like looking down the middle. It's weird. People do it, and it doesn't work real well. So enter 3D VR cameras. So to capture 360 degrees and in 3D, you need a lot more lenses. So you need typically 8 or more. There's one camera out that's got 6, but that doesn't have the greatest 3D component of it. And the prices are incredibly different. So in this category, you can buy a $100,000 camera, something called the John. And if you buy the $100,000 camera, you also get the privilege of paying $20,000 to stitch and render every 30 minutes worth of video. So it goes from ridiculous to absurd. But the point is that when you create VR video, today it's quite difficult. There's cameras as low as $800 or $1,200, which is the place that we're billing in, and then it goes all the way up from there. The point is, the reason I share this much detail with you is that if you're going to create content for a virtual reality headset, you want both the left and the right eye. And the reason you want both left and right eyes is so you have something called parallax, and this is how the brain starts to determine depth, and you can get scale and depth and whatever. Now, this is super nerdy. I'm going to go really quick. If you take those and put them in a shape, right, a round shape, then you're going to do stereo pairs looking in all directions. So this is how it's basically like me turning my head, right? I can see 360 and in 3D. Swap that out for your eyeballs. Not the greatest graphic in the world, but this is how you see depth. All right. Now I got all these different cameras. This is something you're going to want to pay attention to because you may have clients in the future that have an experience, but they have 8 different views of it or 16 different views of it that they're going to want to try to manage and save, right? Maybe you haven't run into it yet, but you will. You'll run into people who have all of these cameras and all this data, and somehow they have to sync together, right? Because they all have to play in parallel. They have to have proper audio associated with them. They have to be properly color balanced. Like if one eye is, oh, it's a little bit tungsten and this one's a little bit daylight, then it's going to look really bad in a headset. So it's fairly complicated process. And then to really complicate things is the audio side of things. So you need at least 4 microphones to make something called first order ambisonics. So ambisonic audio is being able to tell what direction sounds are coming from. So when you're in a VR headset and you hear something behind you, you know to turn around and look at it, right? So all of these pieces come together. In today's production worlds, and maybe 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, you'll start to run into clients that have this type of stuff. They're all independent files. We're working hard with the industry to come up with one standard file format so that we can bundle it all together and make it easier for future generations to access all of this stuff. But the camera and the technique, the camera has changed, but the technique's the same, right? The story is still yours to tell, whether you're the consumer or whether you're the organizer and you're trying to create the story that's out there. It's there to be told, right? It's not like it's some black magic, we're learning something entirely different. Remember we talked about life over time? Well, life over time is still a story. And when you get that dialogue, that's where things start to really make a difference. And in a VR headset, you've got some really interesting things to play with as well. So things like eye tracking, right? My head tracking when I was up here. You know, today I used head tracking and positional tracking with these little boxes that are there. But there's actually technology that will track my eyes in a headset. So even if I don't turn around, I can simply gaze one way or the other, and my images will move. It's really cool stuff. Heat maps, so you can go back and determine within an experience where people spend the most amount of time. So then you can figure out what's most important to them. The industry loves that because in the future, let's say I'm watching a movie and there's an Audi R8 that goes by and I'm like staring at it. Guess what? They know that I watched that car. They're going to say, he maybe likes that car, and then I'll get served advertising for the Audi R8. Foolish on their behalf because I can't afford it, but I like it anyway. And then there's something called haptics. Anybody know what haptics are? Yeah, touch, right? So haptics are really cool because you put on gloves or little shockers. Shocker sounds so negative, but so you get additional stimulus as well. So you know, like if you touch a wall, you can feel that you got something. You touched the wall, even though you didn't really touch the wall. So lots of tools to play with, and it's those tools that make you feel sick, right? Who's heard, wow, that VR is never going to work because it makes you feel sick? Yeah. I hear it a lot. There's a couple things that fixes that. Part of it is technology. Currently, VR capture is usually done at about 30 frames per second. To really eliminate motion sickness, you need to be at 90 frames per second. Very interesting if you go back to the early motion picture industry, back even when they had the silent movies in the movie theater. People would go to the movie theater and they actually had little sickness bags, because people watching the flicker in front of their eyes made them sick. They got motion sickness in a movie theater, right? Because they weren't used to sitting in a dark room and having a screen illuminated in front of them. Like, none of it made sense to the brain. They had never experienced it before. That's what virtual reality is doing to us as well. But there's some things we can do to stabilize the camera and use some shooting techniques to make it better. But don't be surprised, even the first time that you try it, that you might feel sick. Know that it goes away. Usually, this is going to sound crazy, something happens about hour 10. So after you spend about 10 hours in a headset, and maybe not all at once, right? You guys are like, this guy really is nuts. Like, he's Yeah, I'm a little bit nuts. But at hour 10, and like I said, maybe it's 3 minutes here and it's 5 minutes there, and it goes on. But something about hour 10, your body goes, yeah, this is fine. I'm fine with this. The other thing is it's cured my motion sickness in car. So I used to get very car sick. In fact, I always had to drive. My wife's like, how come you don't let me drive? I'm like, well, I get sick, right? But now I don't have that problem anymore. And she's like, well, I'll drive. I don't have a good excuse anymore. Which opens the door, if you get past the sickness part, Mac versus PC. I'm a Macaholic. I'll be the first to say it. I love my Mac. It's an incredibly powerful tool. I will also tell you that it has a terrible GPU. And the GPU is a graphic processing unit, and this is how you deal with picture data and video data. And I know most of you are sitting there going, okay, he is really crazy because my Mac is awesome with my user interface and my screen looks amazing, and it's true. But when you start dealing with virtual reality data and you're dealing with 2 4K video files and 90 frames per second, Mac just doesn't have enough power in the GPU. So you'll see now for the next probably 5 to 6 years, a huge resurgence in PCs. Just Google it right now. You'll see this is the big comeback of the PC for 2 different reasons. And the primary reason is this GPU, the graphic processing unit. So if I just pick on one of these, it's hard to read the things up there. I'll tell you what it says. There's an NVIDIA 1070 card, and that has 1,920 cores in that processor. My Mac has 4 cores on its processor, right? So there's so much more power in the computer. Another side note, really interesting, if you're like, oh, I've got to go get involved with this, I'm going to go buy myself a graphics card today, good luck. They are being hoarded by people who are mining Bitcoins. So you can load up a desktop computer with high-end graphics cards, and you can do billions of mathematical calculations much, much faster than you can on a computer. And so my industry is actually being hurt a little bit right now with people who are hoarding the equipment in order to do Bitcoin mining. The good news is once they figure out that they're going to go broke, they'll have a good computer, and they'll be ready for VR. That's my bet anyway. All right. Just a couple of little pieces just to hit on real quick, file formats. Really, all we do is take pictures, and this is what we use to do GPU at. Oh, look at that. That's the back of the elephant. And anyway, you take several different pictures together. We stitch them together in the computer. That's what we use the GPU to do, is to stitch all of that data together. And it's when you pull that data into a software package, that's when you can open it up, you can adjust your stitch lines, adjust your color, right? Decide what you want people to look at when they first put on their VR headset, optimize all of your settings, and then you output the file, and it makes a video. And I'm going to show you the video here in a second, which is why I'm running this. It saves. It takes about 1 minute to make 1 minute of VR video on a decent computer. And then it ends up looking something like this, right? So this is 4K video per eye. The top part of that video is your left eye. The bottom part is your right eye. The computer knows how to separate those 2 videos so that when you put it back in the headset, you see everything in 360 and in 3D. So if you're curious what raw VR video content looks like, that's what it looks like. So what do you need to start talking to your clients about, right? Like maybe nothing. Maybe you're like, this guy is woohoo. Or you could think of some other things. One is you could tell them that virtual reality is actually real. It really is happening. There's really billions of dollars being thrown into the market, and it will translate or transform how all of us communicate in the future. Like I said earlier, it will start with us at work, and then it will move into healthcare and sciences, training and education, but eventually it will end up on our doorsteps and we will live part of our life in virtual reality. The better you digitize your images today and create your libraries, right, exactly what you guys do all the time, the better you do that now, the better your customer, your client, is set up to move to virtual reality in the future, right? So you can have a conversation and say, Hey, you've heard about this VR thing. Like, we can start to organize your stuff now so that when VR becomes mainstream, you can easily ingest into there because it's all the work has already been done, right? Again, I'm not going to pretend to know your business better than you, but that's an approach that I think would work for me. Know that social VR will really lead the way to mass, because once you get to social VR, people are going to want to share their family moments and their history and all of those types of things with other people around the world. That fourth screen is here to stay. Like I said, there's only about 15 million in the market right now. There will be billions of them in the future. And then digital libraries today will find a new life not only in VR, or virtual reality, but also AR, augmented reality, which I think we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Not me, but the next speaker. And then also starts to feed in things like AI, right? Artificial intelligence and MR, mixed reality. There's so many different places to play. And don't be surprised it's happening today. Like, people see this like baby with all these cameras around there, like, there is no way that that's happening. Well, it is. You can actually bring your baby in and have your baby digitized with a technique called photogrammetry. It's a whole bunch of cameras that are built into a room. They capture a person from every single angle that you can imagine, and then you literally can pick up the digital baby or person or whatever. You can send it to a 3D printer, and you can print it. So the Barbie Funhouse, right, is going to actually be your whole family. You can go out and actually get everybody scanned, and you have mommy and daddy and the kids and the little pink Corvette, right? And off you go. It sounds crazy, but it's happening today. There are companies today that you can buy a cake topper printed in 3D. So you go in, bride and groom, you go in, you get digitized, they print the cake topper, and you have this 3D piece that becomes like an amazing gift afterwards to the bride and the groom, and they have the cake topper. It's here today. Seriously, I'm not making it up. So getting started, right? If you're thinking about getting started in all of this, there's good, better, best ways to do it. Google Cardboard is probably the easiest way. You can simply take your mobile phone and stick it into a headset, and you can look around, you can start to experience it. To me, there's no bad way to get started in virtual reality. The only bad thing to do is not to do it, right? So Google Cardboard is cheap, free, depending on where you go. Put your phone in there and start experiencing it. Gear VR, which works with the Samsung phones. If you have a Samsung phone, Samsung's actually giving away free Gear VR headsets with it, so you can start to experience more and more virtual reality in those. And then if you really want to go all the way in, you can go into these room scale environments like this thing called the HTC Vive, which I was using here, and there's also something called Oculus as well. At the end of the day, it comes down to why care, right? Why do we care? The first piece is it's fun. I do it because it's fun. I don't feel like I've ever worked a day in my life. I took a career path that I chased what I loved, which was photography. Before I actually got into photography, I was in law school, and I was dating this gal, and she said, "Why are you killing yourself at law school?" I said, "Well, that's easy to answer. So I can make lots of money, and someday I can travel the world as a photographer and take pictures." Well, she hit me upside the head, and she's like, "You're crazy. Your priorities are all screwed up." So I put a lot of thought into it. I withdrew from law school. I went over to RIT and went to school there in imaging sciences. I did not become a shooter myself because I never really felt that I was good enough to be that true photographer shooter, like this amazing talent out there. So I aligned with manufacturers that made products and cameras and systems that really empower those creative people to do what they do. So that was my piece. Plus I married the girl, and anyway, now I'm standing on stage talking about virtual reality. But if that doesn't work for you and the power of changing somebody's mind isn't enough for you, chase the money. There's a lot of money in this category right now. A lot of money. There's a lot of women in here, a lot of women in tech. There's a lot of women in VR. There are tons of grants available for women in VR. If you start going into the Facebook pieces, start Googling women in VR, grants, chase some of that money, and try to align with somebody who's doing this, and take your craft, take your skill, right, and apply it to this category. You might surprise yourself. You might come up with something that's kind of interesting and fun. Let's see, back to that crazy screen. And then I look at as, I got a new tool in the toolbox. I just like to make stuff, right? So if I can just make things and make fun things, that's a lot of the reason why I do it. All right, a little bit of an advertisement, just trying to give you a little bit of inspiration. This video I'm going to show you next was not shot with with our Views camera. It was shot using other digital techniques, but to help you see the power of 3D, take a look at this.
Whoa, best party ever! Views, 3D, 360 degrees virtual reality camera. Capture, relive, and share your moments with Views camera. Views, relive the moment.
All right, with that, remember that what you organize tomorrow is being created today. And the tools may be changing, but the opportunity for you to transform people's lives and help them to relive all of those moments are going to be there forever. So with that, there's my contact information. I'm happy to talk with any of this. I don't know if we want to do questions now, or I think you have some table talks that are coming up. So we'll open that discussion. But I appreciate all of your attention. And boy, this is a fun group. It was fun talking to you. Hopefully you learned something.
I have a couple of questions. Does that surprise you?
Oh, boy.
We're going to do a table talk in just a minute, but I want to ask a couple of questions that I think a few people are thinking in the room. First of all, when do you think this will be mainstream? I know you do these estimations. Are we looking 10 years out?
No.
No.
No. The technology is there today to do everything that I showed you today. I think that you're really about 3 years out, 3 to 5 years out before you really see mainstream. There is a movement of something called AAA content. So if you look at the big motion picture studios, when they make a movie, and I'm not going to pick on Ready Player One, we'll talk about that in a second, but when they make a movie, for them to make a VR component with that movie takes almost 3 years. The imaging technology finally got good enough about 1 year ago for them to start to actually produce AAA content. So that content, like Hollywood-produced, really high-end stuff, will start coming out about 2 years from now. And that's what a lot of the industry is betting on, to get more and more headsets out there, so when this really high-end content comes, it starts to go. So you'll start to see a big influx in 3 years, and then you'll see mass adoption in 5, usually around work and business first.
Okay. Now, how large are these files that are being produced?
Yeah, so the files are... It's a hard one to answer, because it depends. VR video content, when shot at proper resolution for a VR headset, is about 1 gigabyte in size for every 1 minute of recording. Yeah. You're like, my God, where am I going to store all that data? Luckily, the cost of storage has come down a little bit. Internet speeds have gotten faster, so you can push data up to the clouds. There's something called 5G coming, which is a new cell phone technology that's going to make getting data to your cell phones even much, much faster than it is today. But yeah, it's a lot of data. Now, the reason I said it depends is if you program the language, which is we're going to end up in the future, and this stuff becomes things like Unreal and Unreal Engine and Unity, then only what you're looking at is sent to the headset. So the amount of files, the amount of data you have to store is much less, because you're not serving everything that's around you. But for a rule of thumb right now, figure somewhere between 500 megabytes to 1 gigabyte for every 1 minute of digital video that you're looking at.
And so my question was going to be, do you see that all being a cloud-based storage application? Are we moving away from computers and hard drives to store that much data? What's your vision?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think that you're going to see most of the data getting pushed up, much like we're seeing digital pictures pushed up right now to Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, other sources like this, and there'll be ways to distribute that content down. But still today, the very best video experience that you can get is having the hard drive on your computer hold the data, because you're not going to have lags and issues with trying to transfer that data in real time. So.
Okay. And so the images that our folks are curating today and the practices that they're using today, applying metadata, are they all applicable with VR technology? Is that the right course of action for them right now, is to continue to, is that a strong component of what they need?
Absolutely. It's a very strong component because, again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in what you do, but my perception of what you do is very well is that you're storytellers, right? And you're curating lives and you're making stories. The story doesn't change. In fact, that's probably one of the weak points of VR right now, is a lot of the VR content is without that story. So people put it on and they're like, okay, fine, I'm looking at something, but because there's no story, it's not engaging. I'm not that immersed in it. But creating that content, creating that story, and bringing the story to life in a headset, you're going to be miles ahead of others. So you have visual data tied with a story, which is going to be perfect for VR content.
Okay. And so if we're scanning in documents and images right now, I think a best practice at a minimum standard is we're scanning in at 600 DPI. Should we be going larger?
I don't think so. And it comes down to pixel size. So when you go to 600 DPI and you print, right, you need more picture data as you get larger with those prints. In a VR headset, there's not as many pixels on that screen itself. In fact, this headset that I was using today is only 1024 by 1024 resolution today, right? But we'll get these up into 4K and ultimately 8K. But I think that 600 DPI is probably a good place to be.
Okay.
Unless it's a slide. Then if it's a slide, you want to go much, much higher.
Right.
I don't know what you use as standard, maybe 2400?
Minimum.
Minimum,
like,
yeah, exactly.
Probably a little higher than that.
Yeah.
And are there any companies that have organizing programs right now, Adobe, any other companies that you say are going to be key players in the future that we should be thinking about in terms of what type of software what companies were utilizing?
It's a great question. Today, I don't see anybody who's really trying to figure out how to curate this space. And it's quite frankly one of my frustrations with the photo industry as a whole, is how do we get out of where we're thinking today about shooting and storing these pictures, and how do we turn it into something else in the future? So I don't think that there's one player. If I was going to give you a piece of recommendation, it does take a certain level of nerdiness. Go to Facebook, because they are the ones that are furthest ahead in all of this technology. And they're the furthest ahead because Facebook purchased a company called Oculus for $3 billion. And so they're the ones that are developing the headsets. And if you go to Facebook and you Google or find within Facebook the VR development pages, now you can just sign up to be a developer and you can go read the articles that are in there. There's a ton of great information about file formats and structure and access to data. And you might not understand everything that you're reading, but what it will do is it will give you a pretty good exposure to the front runner right now in VR content.
Excellent. Okay. We're going to have a discussion group right now, and I think, Jim, you're just going to walk around while everyone's in their discussion groups. What I'd like you to do, first of all, how many of you, like me, were sitting there thinking, job security? How many of you who are producing video slideshows right now and thought that that was difficult just realized how simple that was?
That's a good point.
Right. What I'd love for you to do right now in your tables is think about, what does this mean to me right now? How does this change how I'm approaching my clients about the value in curating their memories today? It's possible you're all thinking, this probably isn't going to be something I'm going to find in my client's collection in the next couple of years, but I think it's safe to assume that the generation that they're passing their photos down to are going to be using this. So it's important for your clients and your seniors and your baby boomers to understand that whatever they're doing today is going to make it easier for their next generation to enjoy and experience their memories. And so you've just added some additional value to what you do. So get into your discussion groups, start talking about how are you going to position this with your clients. Jim will walk around if you had a burning question that I didn't already ask. And then we've got about 10 minutes for this part, so enjoy. I can't wait to hear the buzz in the room about this. And thanks to Jim.
Thank you.